Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast with your hosts, Jefferson Belford and Brian Hernandez. Brian, how are you doing today?
Man, Jeff, I am doing great. We're a week away from the NBA trade deadline. Well, more like 5 days away. We already have a lot of pretty exciting things to talk about on this episode, and man, it's a good time. How about you, Jeff? How you doing?
Mix emotions. Definitely a lot of information going around about trades I'm not too happy about, but also just happy to be in this time of the year because it's the most exciting part of the regular season. You have All-Star game and you have the trade deadline coming down at the same time, around the same time. So that's always fun. That's so much stuff to talk about and so much to get into and unpack. So as we go through this episode, I believe it's episode 18 now, right?
19 actually.
19.
Episode 20 is going to be the trade deadline. Also, before we actually move any further, we announced it during the end of our last episode, and I wanted to bring it up during the start of this one. We are actually changing the time of when we record and when we're gonna upload the podcast episodes, so we can be more consistent. So we generally in the past we recorded on a Thursday night, and then we will plan to upload it on a Friday morning. And then just, life happens. We have to move schedules around. That was a little bit inconsistent. So now what we found to be more consistent is we record on Saturday mornings, and every Monday morning you will get a new episode. So that is our schedule going forward.
All right, perfect. So, our list of topics for today are first leading off with the All-Star list, going over all the players that we see on there, some snubs that we're thinking of, and also then go over into the James Harden update and his current request to leave the Brooklyn Nets, the Blazers and Clippers trade, and then the Julius Randle for Darren Fox trade. Are you ready, Brian?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, perfect. So let's start off with the All-Star game, the lineup. Obviously, the official All-Star draft starts on February 10th. But now we know all of the players that will be able to be selected. Brian, do you have the list as well?
Yes, I have the list, so I can go over that. So we talked about before. Oh, sorry.
I was thinking I do the East, you do the West.
Perfect. Let's do that. Let's do that.
So, on the East side, once again, chosen as the captain, but not going to be able to play in the game is Kevin Durant. You have Giannis coming off the stellar year again, too. Some people presume that he might be the MVP this year. He's also on this team. DeMar DeRozan, obviously having a standout season. He's a starter as well. Joel Embiid, having a phenomenal year. I believe he's the favorite for MVP at this point. And Trae Young being Trae Young, he's dominating in his way. And then starting off the reserves for the East is Jimmy Butler, consistent part of his career now, finding his way to being an all-star, always going to be an all-star caliber player in his career, it seems like. Then you got I'm happy that they were able to get him into this. Darius Garland was selected for his first all-star game. James Harden, once again, this is his 10th time an all-star. Zach LaVine, it's his second time of being an all-star, so good to see that they have the Bulls have this representation after their amazing season that they're having, and I believe they're still number one in the East right now. Then you have Chris Middleton, Jason Tatum, and another surprise is Fred VanVleet was able to make it onto the East reserves.
Yeah, a lot of surprises, at least in my opinion, for the East side of how things actually end up turning out. For the West side, it's pretty basic. It's pretty basic, other than one that we talked about already in the past. But first, you got the guy who is going to be here every single year of his career until he retires, LeBron James. Super, super obvious. You got last year's MVP in Nikola Jokic. The one surprise that I talked about is Andrew Wiggins, who, after our conversation, Jeff, like, we both agree that he deserves to be an all-star. It's just the all-star starter was the one controversy. And so listen to that episode to get like the full opinion about that. But next, Steph Curry, another guy. He's probably going to be on an MVP, or not MVP, an all-star for the rest of his career. And then for the first, is this the first time in the All-Star game? John Moran as a starter is definitely his first time, but first time All-Star. John Moran, first appearance. Like, that's this man. Another, you mentioned two MVP candidates in your side, and on the West, John Morant for sure is an MVP candidate. For the reserves, you have Devin Booker. Devin Booker's always there. Luka, who I wished was a starter, but you know, he's still going to be in the game. Rudy Gobert, Draymond Green, Donovan Mitchell, Chris Paul, and then, who I'm very happy who made this team. Has he been an all-star before? You can confirm. Karl-Anthony Towns is the last starter. He has? All right, cool.
He's been a reserve a few times.
Got it. I'm glad. I'm glad he's on this list. I also could have seen him as a starter. So Jeff, what do you think about this all-star list right now? All the players that made it.
You know, when you look at it, I'm not too upset, but I know there's some players that I feel could have made this list. That could have replaced some of these players on this list and you know, really step up in that, like step up and get that all-star spot instead. A few people I think of that come to mind is first, Jared Allen, just being that it's in Cleveland first too. No brainer in the sense of like how he's been playing this year. He's a key part beyond Evan of like the resurgence of what the Cavs are doing this year. And obviously Garland as well too. But seeing how he plays and how he fits in with this team, definitely, it's surprising that he wasn't able to make it to this all-star game. Another person I was thinking of, two people actually, and they're both ironically on the same team, is Bam Adebayo.
Yeah.
I believe Bam has the talent to be in the all-star game. I think it could have been due to injury that has pushed him away from getting that spot this year. But the second person is Tyler Hero. I think that Tyler Hero gave a legitimate case as for why he should be an all-star this year. From how he was playing, coming off the bench, he really looks like a starter, someone that deserves to be starting. But he accepts his role and he does what he has to do. So there's that. And then the last person I'll say is LaMelo. Obviously, is a world-class baller. Like, to not have him in a game like this kind of is like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah, it's so one thing that I found that's really interesting, because we talked about it last time when we talked about the starters, was they needed three big men in a sense, and then two guards. But they didn't really kind of follow that role at all for the reserves, because looking at the East reserves, there's no other center available. So that's where I was really hoping that a player like Jared Allen, like you mentioned, would be able to sneak his way in. Even I'd even be fine with Bam, but like it's really sad to see Jared Allen having an amazing year, being the anchor for the Cavs defense, who've been a huge surprise this season. With LaMelo Ball, what I do actually, yeah, LaMelo Ball, in my opinion, should have made this roster, should have made this list. When we talked about in the past, I would have been fine taking out players like Jimmy Butler. Although Jimmy Butler has been having an amazing year, always he misses a lot of games, a lot of injury stuff, and that's just where like I feel like a player like LaMelo could have had the one up on someone like him, even Chris Middleton and all this stuff. I think it would have been fun to have LaMelo there, but you mentioned Kevin Durant is injured, so someone's gonna have to step up and take his spot. Who do you think gets this final spot?
Well, then, like we said, I think just based off of the moment, the timing of it, big wise, and just a all around good story, it's going to be Jared Allen in my mind. Like NBA would really fumble the bag if they go and they choose anyone else. Because, like, obviously, like sometimes I think we cease to forget that there's a financial reason to be a part of the All-Star game. Not only is it for credibility reasons why I say that, and growing your brand, growing your notoriety in the NBA, right? But also in the game, you get bonuses. You get bonuses for the performance that you have. And then you're up front of people that could decide to market you in a certain way in your career. So that's the one side of it that a lot of people forget about. And I think that like Jared Allen definitely is the type of player that if given that chance, he has the type of personality that could flourish, like if put around people and the right people, put it as that. So, he already got the nickname the Fro. Think about how far they could go with that.
Yeah, it's I really like to see Jared Allen make it. I think it'd be a lot of fun. What I do find, so one, you mentioned Jared Allen. I can also see LaMelo getting that spot. But then lastly, what I did actually kind of find pretty interesting is that we didn't name a player that also did not make this All-Star reserves or list or anything, the All-Star list in general, is Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal, was he last year's scoring champion? And he led the league in scoring, and this man's been All-Star, many times in the past. Another guy that's just not on the list. It seems like for the East, the talent is just so high right now that to make that All-Star game is extremely tough.
Yeah, no, at this point, we've talked about this in the past, the BCs, right? There's if you look at the top teams, what's separating them is games, right? Is few games. So not only just the sheer talent, the competition that's coming from that sheer talent is going crazy. So that's why I think I agree with you. There's no justification of having someone like Bradley Beal in this game because of that, because their team's slumping. There's other teams that have better players, younger players that are, ready to be in a game like this, or deserve to be in a game like this to showcase their talent,
Yeah.
And I have no problem. I don't bat an eye about it. They better.
Moving on to the West Side. So some players that I found that was kind of interesting that they weren't on the All-Star list. I mean, so for the West, all these names I mentioned, they kind of feel like guaranteed locks. So it just makes it so much harder for any of these other guys to make the list. But the first guy I want to bring up, one of my favorite players in the NBA, Dejante Murray. This man has been having an amazing season, although not really leading the Spurs to anywhere special or anything like that. But you can tell Dejante Murray going forward is going to be a special type of player. It's sad. He's not going to be able to make this list. Another player that I actually found was pretty interesting, I know when we did our naughty or nice list, we kind of went back and forth on, and he was a little polarizing for us, was Anthony Davis. What do you think about Anthony Davis missing this All-Star game?
I don't feel bad about it. I think that was something that we debated too, having that conversation when we were making it. We thought that surely just by fan votes he would get it, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that he did not get it by fan votes just goes to show, like, at that point we should have known that he was not going to get the spot, because they're going to want to give it to someone that's more deserving at this point in the season. You know, he's missed in this first 50 amount of games.
50-ish,
he's probably missed a good about like 60% of those games, right?
Yeah.
So how do you justify giving an all-star spot to someone like that? You know, it's a slap in the face to everybody else that could be either having their first time as an all-star or their consistent spot of being an all-star.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, completely agree there. The last person that I guess is not surprising, but when we talked about it with Andrew Wiggins making the starter, he's one of the guys that he's a reason why Andrew Wiggins is a starter, and that Paul George not on this list. And even if he did make it, he wouldn't even be playing because he's injured for the whole season. But do you have any thoughts on Paul George? I think he was on my list as a starter prior.
Yeah, it's once again, it's kind of like the same thing with AD, but a little bit different, because Paul George did have a good start to the season. Is just an unfortunate thing to have happen with his elbow. So I have absolutely no problem that he was omitted from the list. But before we close it out, I got another one from the East that we could have thought about. And this guy had a very strong part of the season, an early part of the season, even though his team was struggling. But now as his team is figuring it out, they're working themselves back into the play-in. One of his teammates got chosen, but not him, is Jaylen Brown. Like, how do you feel about that?
I did have, I don't remember if I had Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. I always had, for the All-Star game, it was either one or the other. I never really saw both of them making, even though they both made it last year, especially just with the talent being so high this year. I didn't have him, or I didn't really expect him too much, but it is kind of a little bit surprising. Jaylen Brown, fantastic player. He's had his ups and downs in the seasons, like you mentioned. I just think it keeps coming down to, like, there's so many other good players, like, you know, Chris Middleton, Van Vliet, who just made it, who's also been having a fantastic season, Darius Garland. Like, it's just, where does this guy fit? Man, going forward though, to make an all-star game is going to be extremely tough.
I agree.
Man, so Jeff, now that we covered this, I'm excited for this all-star game. They're going to have the all-star draft coming up, and that's going to be fun to find out who these teams are actually going to be, and we can discuss, like, who do we think team is going to win. But I know this has been a lot of controversy for you, but do you want to move on to the James Harden update that's been happening?
Yeah, so I guess this is a perfect way to segue and combine the two topics. Is, like you mentioned, the draft is coming. The All-Star draft is coming. And the All-Star draft happens to fall on the trade deadline day.
Does it?
So there could be a very awkward situation where Kevin Durant has to decide if he wants James Harden on his team, and he just got traded to the 76ers. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about what the package looks like, where we are with the conversations, and how I personally feel about how this will go down.
Yes.
So with the whole situation is that I don't think that first I'm trying to pull up the exact assets that are being talked about being moved. So presume that the trade will be centered around, obviously, Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, as well as Maxey and Seth Curry. And then Harden, I believe, will be the big horse coming from the Nets. Obviously, I think they're going to need to throw in a couple other pieces to make the money make sense for all of those guys. Then I think the next thing is, I'm sorry, I'm really blanking right now, but the next thing is that comes to mind with this situation is the Nets are now open to having this conversation, and this was something that goes against what they were saying even just a couple weeks ago, and even goes against some things that Harden was saying just a couple weeks ago about how he obviously may be upset with the current situation, but he came to Brooklyn to win a championship. And now it seems like that has changed completely in his mindset. And we'll see what that really means. But Brian, let me know how you feel, and then I'll tell you how I feel personally about this trade.
So it's like you mentioned, like the backstory is so fascinating to me because, well, one, the 76ers had the opportunity or could have pursued this trade just to get James Harden a long time ago, like even before James Harden went to the Nets. And then, like you mentioned, and then there was reports, I think it was last week, I was talking about how this offseason looks like there's going to be some tampering. There's already conversations that executives believe that are happening from the 76ers front office and James Harden already, because like all the relationships they have there. But this was always thought to happen during the offseason. So we're going to see, the big three Nets for the rest of the season and potentially win a championship. Now, like you mentioned, the Nets are open. There's a report by Shams who, if it's not Woj, the second best person is Shams. Shams reported that the Nets are open to trading James Harden. So now this is actually a conversation and happening, open to trading him before the deadline. You mentioned the package for the Sixers would look something like Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, Seth Curry, and Simmons, of course. What I did find kind of interesting, though, is that that same report that Shams put out, he also talked about that the 76ers are not looking to trade Maxey, or not looking to include Maxey in any deal. And then a couple weeks ago, we got a report that the 76ers were not looking to include Matisse Thybulle in any of these trades as well. And he was untouchable in trade talks. And it's just like so fascinating. Like, how does this even happen if these guys aren't in the deal or anything like that? I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah. So what I'm starting to think is interesting about this whole situation is that how the revolving doors that's constantly happening with the Sixers situation, and how the Sixers are constantly changing their mind on their decision making on who they're going to move, who they want to actually lock down in on. And it just shows that there's some uncertainty in the front office, possibly from different parts of the front office, because they're just probably not all on the same page. There's we talked about this in the past when we in the off season when we spoke about the handling of the whole Ben Simmons last year, what happened, right? And whenever your GM is saying one thing, your coach is saying something else, and then your front office, your president is saying something else, you're in trouble because like you have to have a consistent voice when you're out there. But everything shows that there's nothing consistently being done. There's no continuity within the front office with the Sixers because you could see a report tomorrow that says Ben Simmons going to the Warriors. To the Wizards for Bradley Beal, and they won't include Tyrese Maxey or Dudley, right? Then you'll see the report of if James Harden, if you trade for James Harden, those guys are coming. You know what I mean? Like there's just too much, just way too much noise coming from there, and obviously all of these noises are manufactured. It's not like they're coming from nowhere. So it just goes to show there's no consistency in that front office, which I would say is not a good situation for James Harden, who is already a person that I think needs more stability in his situations. He always seeks more stability in his situation where it's a lot easier for him to do his thing. By all means, I'm not upset with him wanting to leave. What I do think is obviously first initial reaction is a little butthurt because didn't even really get to see the big three play like that. It's the Nets curse. But still in the time that they did play, you saw that the unit was something that was formidable. Even if you didn't think that they could win every series or they could win a championship, you knew that every series it would be hard for the team that they're going to play. Because please tell me how you're going to stop all three of them on a consistent basis, So that's going to suck if it does break up. But what I will say is the bright side of this all is you kind of get a heightened version of what you had before the James Harden trade. So if you told me 2 years ago you could trade off what Tyrese Maxey looks like now for what Karis LeVert is, you trade off what Matisse Thybulle is right now for what Spencer Dinwiddie is now, and you trade off Steph Curry and Simmons for what Jared Allen is now. And obviously, I still want Jared Allen, but that's still an upgrade in the depth that you have. And then you pair that with Kyrie, half of Kyrie, and KD. That's a formidable team. It definitely is a formidable team, and it gives you a lot more flexibility with what you want to do with the roster as well too. So about this too. Patty Mills, if not included in the trade, I hope he isn't. You still have Patty Mills. He now can go back into his role, fit his role. A lot of other guys on their team now could go back to fitting into their roles. You don't need to ask James Johnson to play 30 minutes. You have to ask guys like Embry to shoot threes. Like there's certain things that will find their way into fitting in. But there is a lot of question marks too. Like, where does Joe Harris fit in on this? Is he one of the pieces that's moving? Because that's what it feels like. Because you can't just you don't get Seth Curry and have also Joe Harris.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see, like to think about it, because like you're saying, no matter what happens, the Nets will still be huge championship contenders. Like if they trade, if they don't, I agree with everything you're saying in terms of like right now you would love to see James Harden stay on the team. And my opinion is still, I don't think the trade's going to happen. Just personally, just because of like we talked about in the past with Darren Murray being so stingy and trying to fleece the other team, and it's just I don't see that happening. So I can see them butting heads and potentially just this being kicked off to the off season, and pick up the conversations from there. What I do like about it though for the Nets, so we talked a little bit offline, Jeff, of like I really like the idea if healthy, you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie on offense. And then you have Ben Simmons, who was thought to be one of the best defensive players in the NBA, also there leading the team, like anchoring that defense. And ready, the defense is pretty good and are very good. And then you kind of even out the rest of your team. So like the team is playing really well when you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie, but like as you see now, when Kevin Durant is out and then you have Kyrie for half of the games and James Harden is also missing some games, things start breaking down because the rest of the team isn't as the team is pretty top heavy. So if you end up getting some of these other guys, it really starts evening it out because look at what they're doing now for the 76ers when you have Joel Embiid, who's an MVP candidate. And then after that, everyone else is just kind of like really good, just really good players. So you can always use more really good players on your team. Like you mentioned, you wouldn't have to play James Johnson 30 minutes or whatever. Like, I think no matter what happens here, the Nets still come out on top. I'm interested to even think, or what do you think about the fit of James Harden and Embiid playing together?
It definitely will be interesting, but like James Harden is the type of player I think that can fit into other players' style, but he also is going to ask for them to fit into his too. I think a pick and pop like game, but it did a little bit different. Obviously, not like some Shaq and Kobe type pick and pop, but like you know what I mean. Like if he has to drop back, shoot a three, Joel Embiid got that. You know what I mean? Like he could do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and then it becomes a threat because switching, you have to read on the go now. You have to really read. Like what are you gonna do? Because Joel Embiid could fade back and, like I said, take that three, or he could decide to roll right to the rim, right? And you also have the threat that, okay, so we just say we commit to Joel Embiid. We're not going to commit to James Harden, and you mess yourself up. Now you got James Harden going right to the rim, and like it could be a very deadly duo. It's just what is what is going to be left in the rubble once this is all over? And another aspect that I think we got to keep in mind too, Nets have complete leverage in this situation.
Yep.
He's not going to the Sixers unless he's traded. So even in the offseason, he cannot. The Sixers do not have the capital to get him, get a player like him. So he needs to be signed and trade, right?
Yeah.
So the Nets can, if he's given all indication that he wants to go to the Sixers, right? Like you work out a trade now, and don't wait till the offseason because you know what? Honestly, and it seems like NBA players nowadays don't have this for some reason, is a no trade clause. You work out somewhere else for him. And you throw that right out at the Sixers just so they can see that, hey, you don't want to play ball with us? Like we could very well send him somewhere else.
What's kind of fascinating? Well, one, I would love the idea of like the Nets just being like, you know what, let's look elsewhere in the league. Who else wants James Harden? That'd be really funny. But what I do find pretty interesting still is like, do we have any update on the situation with Ben Simmons on the vaccination stuff? Because this is the whole Kyrie situation. And if Ben Simmons comes as well, and I would hope he's not as stubborn as Kyrie with this whole situation of like, how does that work out? Because sorry, you go.
So that's interesting. And honestly, this might be an indication that something is going to happen. Is that recently I did see a report, but I wanted to make sure that it was reliable source now. Is that 2 days ago he did get vaccinated. He is vaccinated. So wow. So I think he knows. He knows something, or they're telling him something about this. That something might come down, and that's starting to lean towards maybe this has been talked about a lot longer than we've thought.
Yeah,
that was one of the things that's contingent on it. Literally, the report that I see is a picture of him in the Nets arena too. So I'm going to tell you this. For me, to have a player like that will be so bittersweet because a few years back, I think it was 2018, he messed with my boy Jared Dudley and Allen, and I still got a sore spot for them, like going after us like that. So seeing him come to the team definitely isn't going to make me happy, that happy. Yeah. But hopefully he becomes, if traded to the Nets, he becomes the player he was when he was on the Sixers. Because honestly, you're not going to ask that much out of Ben Simmons. Yep. You don't need for Ben Simmons to be a shooter on the Nets. You need him to be essentially Draymond Light, like our version of Draymond Green, And if he can do that, it's leaps and bounds better than what he could do with the Sixers now, because you got to – I've said it for years, is I just don't think that Simmons and Embiid's play styles coincide with each other because they're playing at two different pace. Like Embiid wants to slow the game down, which makes sense when the playoffs come. And then Ben Simmons trying to speed up the game, two different paces.
And then, so like he's mentioned that, like a Draymond Light, I think he would excel. I think that's his perfect role around the league. I think anytime like people talked about in the offseason of like, where are you going to trade Ben Simmons? The thought process was always that Draymond kind of position. And it's also nice if he goes to the Nets, just thinking about it, of like playoff time. We've seen Ben Simmons maybe not live up to expectations, but still play great defense and everything, but just the offense side, not as great. You don't need him to do something like that when you have Kevin Durant. Look what happened this last playoff series when Kevin Durant just literally just give him the ball. He plays the entire game. He goes off for like 50 points and you guys win the game. Like you don't need Ben Simmons to really do anything on the offensive side. So I think I really like the fit. I think it would actually be very nice for the Nets. It actually makes them more injury proof because instead of now having, Kevin Durant who gets injured a lot, Harden who's been having this hamstring issue, Kyrie with the vaccination stuff, now your team's is spread pretty evenly and you don't have to worry about like this injury stuff too much. So I actually like it for both teams. I'm still skeptical. After your report of like Ben Simmons did just get vaccinated, I'm still a little skeptical of it happening or not. I'll believe it when I see it, but I like it.
All right. So our next topic is heading into, I believe it was yesterday, or the day before.
I think it was probably Friday. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So yesterday, the two teams announced that they were going to commence with a trade. The Los Angeles Clippers and the Trail Blazers. The Trail Blazers will be taking back Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, and Keon Johnson. And then the Clippers will be taking back Norman Powell and Robert Covington. Also, the Trailblazers are also taking back a 2025 second round pick as well. How do you feel about this, Brian?
Oh man, this one is so puzzling to see. Like, why are the Blazers doing this? Why are the Blazers trading their only assets for non-assets? Eric Bledsoe, as good as he was like 8 years ago, Eric Bledsoe's not the same player anymore. He's not really that great. Justice Winslow, so many injury problems. He looked like he was going to be a very promising player, but it's just maybe he can, become that again, but I don't really see it too much. Keon Johnson just got drafted this last year. A non-shooter, just literally, he's a really good cutter. The guy's really athletic, but like that's about it for him. And then a 2025 second round pick for your two main assets. This makes no sense at all. And I try to think like, how does this make sense? What do the Blazers fans think? I went to the subreddit. Everyone's flipping out. Everyone's freaking out of like, why did we just do this? Everyone there is so upset. Everyone there is like making jokes of like, I can see why Neil O'Shea was bullying people, because if people had ideas like this, then they deserve to be bullied. Like they're just like, everyone's so upset. To me, it makes no sense. Essentially, what happened was because the Blazers traded 2 first-round picks for Robert Covington, 2 first-round picks, and then they traded Gary Trent Jr. for Norm Powell. Now Gary Trent Jr. is going off and he's insane and he's doing extremely well for the Raptors. So you traded 2 first-round picks and Gary Trent for Justice Winslow, Eric Bledsoe, Keon Johnson, and a second-round pick. Like that's what you traded. It's mind-blowing right now. What do you think about it?
No, I agree. So my biggest thing is, like you mentioned, the Norman Powell thing. We spoke about this with the Jalen Brunson topic a few weeks back, or either it was last week.
Yeah.
But this is so interesting to bring up at this time. I see this come up at this time is that they're giving up on someone that they just gave that money to. They just gave him that 5 years, 90 mil. And that was that area where we were saying that either you're in a spot of you're being overvalued or undervalued, right? And Norman Powell, I think, is a pretty decent basketball player. He did get overpaid by my estimation, but still, that's an asset you keep. Like, you just committed on that, and you give them to the Clippers. Granted, this may be a decision making to try to see if they can make a run for the playoffs this year. But please don't forget that Kawhi Leonard is still on this team, and Paul George is still on this team. To have Robert Covington possibly coming off the bench, have Norman Powell also, who already has a relationship with Kawhi, winning a championship with him, on this team as well. I think next year we could be talking again about where the Clippers stand amongst the best teams in the West. The obviously off-season piece, both of their stars are injured, but still they've had some quality wins. So they already have quality players on their team that are going to be there next year when these guys are healthy, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how everything fits in. But best believe that this was a play for the future for when these guys are back.
Yeah, 100%. I like the idea of this is amazing for the Clippers. Like Clippers, there's no world where they lose this trade and like lose it by any margin at all. Of like you mentioned, next year, this is going to help them big time. But even for this year, we talked about how they don't have their first round pick this year. So it makes no sense for them to tank. And whoever has their first round pick, I'm sure is probably pretty upset right now. I'm like, no, the Clippers are going to probably make the play in at least or something like that. It's great for them this year. It's just, I can't, it doesn't make sense to me for the Trailblazers. It just doesn't.
You know what makes it more puzzling, though, Brian, is that Robert Covington was in this trade deadline one of the most coveted pieces No puns intended. But covered his pieces in this deadline, right? And for it to see he was traded for a bag of peanuts is like what like anyone could have made a trade similar to that and got this guy. I know there's a lot of teams that could benefit from a player like that. He has grown his offensive game a lot from what he was about probably 5-10 years. Well, I said 10. 5 years ago when he was like, I believe he was still with the Sixers at that point. Like a complete different player of who he is currently, right? So, I just don't understand why you would let two of these pieces go so easily, so willingly. But my theory of what I believe it is that they are trying to start the ship of that rebuild. And the best way to tell Dame, like, hey, we know you love it here and all of that, but they're going to need a breakup, right? So they're just going to do everything to show, like, hey, I think it's time that we move you because we just don't have the assets here. Like, we don't have the pieces to be a great team right now. We don't want to waste the rest of your career,
So that makes sense to me if the Blazers ended up getting a first round pick, if they ended up getting some future assets, but instead they got Keon Johnson, who like it's another guard in their already guard heavy rotation. You get Justice Winslow and Eric Bledsoe. I'm just ignoring those two guys because I don't think there's going to be much there. But you get a second round pick before, like you mentioned, Covington's one of the highest, or teams wanted Covington. Teams were willing to at least give something. Maybe at worst, I believe you probably could get 2 second round picks for Covington. But instead, you got this. It's like a tank, but like the worst tank you can possibly do.
Damn. Honestly, I went in to look at the roster after you mentioned that they're guard heavy. It's not even a joke how much guards they have on this team. And I'm trying to count them all right now. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can argue that one person is a guard. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 players on their team is a guard. Wow. And obviously there's also showing some of their two-way players. So there's that as well. But it is very guard heavy, extremely guard heavy.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I feel bad for Blazers fans. I wonder like what this means for Dame, because like you mentioned that he wanted the Supermax here. He wanted the Supermax to play with the Blazers. Do they give it to him now? Like are they looking to move off of him? I saw a report from Chad Ford that was like, if Damian Lillard were to leave the Blazers, now it's being reported that he wants to stay on the West Coast, so he'd prefer a West Coast team. Like, it's a mess over there. I feel bad for them.
I always thought that Dame's play is, he is an Oakland boy. He would want to, at some point, play for the Warriors, but it just doesn't look like that's ever going to that's ever going to happen if that guy Steph Curry's still going to be alive. There's no shot that guy's leaving there willingly. It looks like that he's going to be there for the rest of his career, right? So Dame's going to have to find somewhere else. And I don't know if seeing now that the Russell Westbrook experiment is failing terribly. It leads me to believe that I don't think a Dame experience would work well either if he was sent to the Lakers. So I think that he should stay try to stay away from a trade like that. But I do think, and it was something that even before the trade went down, I thought was a very interesting place to get traded to, is he would fit the Clippers. I would love if they found a way.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I don't think Paul George would be happy with this, but a way to trade Paul George for Damian and move him to the Clippers with Kawhi, a healthy Kawhi, and Lillard. I like that duo. I really do like that duo.
I like that too. I think that actually probably complements Kawhi better than Paul George. Well, I wonder now, with something like this happening, that teams in front offices are calling the Blazers like, okay, these guys can get fleeced. Let me try to fleece them too. They're open market right now. Let me try to get everything. Like, it's like a yard sale right now. That's what it seems like.
Oh yeah, typically you'll see that too, though, is when there's like a firing of a GM and trades are being handled by assistants. The GMs on the other side of it are going to try to get the upper hand in some way, and sometimes they do. We still, to this day, we still think about what the Rockets got when Raphael Stone came into place, and what is left from that trade for James Harden. There's nothing there. Like, there's nothing left.
Yeah.
They probably got a pick. That's it. Like, that's all that's left. And Nets have Kevin Durant for the next 5 years, unless he falls off a cliff in the next 3 years. I'll give it 3 years before you start to really see a massive progression in his game. But that pick is almost like fool's gold at this point,
I'm like surprised that it's not talked about more often of how egregious that trade was. Of like, you trade a generational talent in James Harden for nothing. Well, they had Victor Oladipo, but they traded Victor? Did they buy him out or trade him? I don't remember, but like,
I believe he was he may have been bought out.
I don't know. If it was a trade, it was like nothing at all.
No. Victor Oladipo was traded to one of the teams where they bought him out. I forgot which team. Because he was traded from the Pacers to, I think, the Rockets. He was traded from the Pacers to the Rockets, and then that's when they bought him out.
That's a mess. Do you want to move on to our last main topic? I do have a little bit for the weekly roundup, but do you want to move on to the next?
Yes. So the next topic, and I'm sure, Brian, you saw this this video recently, is I think it was last night after the game. One of the reporters was speaking to Julius Randle, and he said that it seems that the team is willing to moving you sometime before the deadline. And Julius Randle said, Who said that? Where are you getting this report from? And this guy started stuttering like he was like Elmer Fudd. Is that Elmer Fudd the one?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, he could not tell Julius Randle who he got that report from. But it was pretty funny to see that. But at the same time, it is very, very unprofessional as Julius Randle is continuing to display this for no reason. We obviously do not know what's going on with Julius Randle. Like, I like to think that, sometimes there's stuff that's happening outside of the court that could be leading to a player being like this. But the drastic jump in his attitude from what it was last year to what it is this year is two completely different people. Yeah. Some people may say that it's extension year vibes. That's why he went crazy last year. But at the same time, I do think it's more of there has to be something that's going on that we just don't know. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, this does not stop the Knicks from having conversations about a trade. And the trade is centered around another player that is struggling this year, is Darren Fox and his situation with the Kings is deteriorating over time, as obviously he sees his names constantly being rumored in trades with the Kings. He's in an incompetent team with incompetent front office. And in a place where I'm not going to say it's terrible, but when you think of California, you do not think of Sacramento,
Yeah.
So he's just like in a bad spot right now, and both of these guys need a refresher. My honest to heart feel about it for Julius Randle is I would feel bad if he has to be traded to the Sacramento, because that's pretty much that's where you go for your career to die.
That's what everyone calls it, basketball hell. And then even their subreddit is called "Welcome to Basketball Hell." Like, it is crazy. What you mentioned with Julius Randle, like, does he have some external stuff? Maybe he does. I know he just had a baby, so maybe he's not getting a lot of sleep or anything like that. Maybe he's just like super moody. But there is a lot that's a mess there. That video you mentioned of like him and the reporter going back and forth. So that reporter is like famously known for like asking the hard, awkward questions and everything. But like that was that was so bad. Initially, the reason why this is mainly being like a topic being brought up is because Ian Begley, who I know you're not a huge fan of, but he does have like some ties with the Knicks. That he did mention that the organization is willing and open to trading Julius Randle. And then Brian Windhorst came out and said that the Knicks are open to trading Julius Randle for Darren Fox. And then you kind of look at it. It's, all right, how did this originate? So I looked about it for the Kings. So first, the Kings were looking to trade Darren Fox for Ben Simmons. Then the 76ers try to tag along Tobias Harris, and then that deal fell through. So that's done. Then the Kings were looking to trade Darren Fox for Sabonis. And Sabonis, in my opinion, is pretty similar. He does very similar things to Julius Randle. They're kind of they play the same position. Their numbers look pretty similar, especially last year. But the Pacers are not interested, which makes sense because they have a lot of guards. They have Malcolm Brogdon, who they just signed to an extension. They just drafted Chris Duarte. Like, they don't need another guard. So it makes sense they're not interested. The Kings are looking to also trade Darren Fox for Jeremy Grant. So they're looking at that. And that's actually something that could have some legs, but it looks like the Detroit Pistons are looking for like a lot for Jeremy Grant. And also think about it, the guy plays like small forward, power forward. They just drafted Cade Cunningham, who's looking very good this season. So then you kind of look at it and it's like, all right, who else is out there? The Kings were looking to also trade Fox for Randle. So the Kings actually do have interest in this. But a report a couple of days ago, I think it was before the Brian Windhorst report, Sam Amick said that he didn't think the Knicks would be interested and that there wouldn't actually be anything there. And that the Knicks wouldn't be open to trading Fox for Randle. So now with this new report with Windhorst saying that they are, it does actually make this kind of interesting. And you think about it. You think about all the turmoil that's happening with Julius Randle and the Knicks. There was a report as well with Ian Begley, who was talking about, or I think it was Mark Berman, but they were talking about pretty much now there's a rift between Julius Randle and Tom Thibodeau, who we actually never heard this before, and then Julius Randle, Tom Thibodeau, and the fans. And now this is just like, this is so interesting. Well, one, why is he's so butthurt with the fans and everything? Because he's playing bad and the fans are not happy. So he's really upset. But it seems like Julius Randle now there's some kind of rift between him and the coach. And I could potentially see something happening during this deadline because this is starting to become a huge problem. The thoughts around the league right now is that, or some of the reporters that cover the Knicks, they talk about how Julius Randle feels like that what they had last year was a good thing, and then now bringing in players like Kemba and Evan Fournier, it kind of changes up the way they play, and now this is the reason why he's not playing as well, and now this is why there's this tension and this rift here between what seems like the Knicks front office and the Knicks team, and then Julius Randle, and it's becoming a huge mess. I think they might eventually. I would love to see them trade Julius Randle right now. It's a complete mess. It stinks thinking about how he was last year. It's just that it's just not working out anymore. And then you think about last year with Julius Randle. Why did he play well? Maybe you look at, okay, there's no fans in the stand. There's no fans around or anything like that. Sacramento, there's no fans in Sacramento. So, no, I'm playing there. But what do you think about a swap for Darren Fox and Julius Randle? What do you think about that?
So I want to go off one thing first that you were saying. I think, I think we alluded to this earlier in the year too, is that, i.e., based off of what you were saying, cramping his style. And that was something that we talked about with early on in the season, is that, like, when you bring in these offensive players, right, these offensive, they're supposed to be the reinforcements on the offense, right? And then they take away from what they were doing last year on the defensive side, where they were impressive. So I think that's a report that you got to believe, because that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense why he feels the way. And it honestly is possibly one of the reasons why it translated into how he's playing right now, because he probably doesn't want to play with these guys. He doesn't like these guys. We clearly could say he does not like Evan Fournier. Like he showed that on the court. So, it makes sense. Like, that report makes a lot of sense. As for the fit, I think we said it last week. We've been waiting. You've been waiting like 20 years for the Knicks to get a decent point guard. So this answers your prayers, and you get a decent point guard. And who says that De'Aaron Fox coming to the Knicks doesn't revive his career and him as a player? Obviously this is the NFL, but sometimes you'll see a player that's in a situation where they don't look as good as you thought they should have been. The example is this player named Matthew Stafford that's going to be in the Super Bowl in about 2 weeks. He was on the Lions, on a team where no one goes there, no one wants to be there, no one wants to play there, right? And you kind of forget players like that. But once they're back in a role or place where there's relevancy, they play the level of where they're supposed to be. And that's the same thing that I could see happening with De'Aaron Fox. Is now he's in New York, now he's in the spotlight. People see his game again. They're like, oh, wait, I remember this. I remember how he actually was really good. You know what I mean? But he will be scrutinized a lot more, because I bet you if he could have literally took a trap in the middle of the court and no one would know because he's playing in Sacramento, But now in New York, like, he can't pass gas and without anyone knowing. So he's gonna have to, be able to deal with that, but also be able to flourish. And I think it is a scenario where he can flourish. As for the Julius Randle side, man, I feel bad. Like I said, for anybody that is being forced to be thrown in basketball Alcatraz, like I feel bad for you. Like you don't deserve. I don't care what happened to you. You don't deserve to be over there.
Yeah.
But let's say he does mesh with like Halliburton and with Davion Mitchell. I could see a way where the three of them work. But I think he has to remember. I know he's older now too, but like he's not acting like he's older. But I think it's gonna be, if Fox is gone, it's gonna be Tyrese's team. So you have to allow for him to have the team be a complementary piece. And I think this team can actually do something at some point, but just got to put a couple more things together. And who knows? They probably could slide you even Marvin Bagley in that trade.
Yeah, that's where, because right now, at least on the Knicks side, they need to add a little bit more. So then you think about maybe you add either Kemba or Alec Burks somewhere in there. Then potentially, like you're saying, like maybe Bagley comes along as well. There's a lot of things there. So I went to the Kings subreddit as well, and Kings fans are like, nope, do not want to do this, do not want this trade or anything like that. Listening to like I saw there's like a clip of like Kings like podcasters, and they were actually more open to it, of like you're saying, they like the fit because right now they see the future of their guards being Davion Mitchell and Tyrese Halliburton. Like that's where they want it. So being able to now add a power forward who also can handle the ball, could do a little bit of everything, kind of intrigues them. So I think it kind of fits for both teams. What I am a little bit afraid with Darren Fox is like he's a very bad 3-point shooter. Of like he's shooting 25% this year on threes, and last season he was at 32, and it's just like he's not very good at that. He's not really a great passer. If you look at his advanced statistics, of like he's actually one of the worst passing point guards out there. It's like that's not super, what you love to see. But anyway, the team just doesn't work for Julius Randle. I'd love for them to create another space for actually we can see some Cam Reddish playing some games, because as of now there's just no rotation spots for him. My last thing is like, even thinking about it, I'd honestly rather trade like Julius Randle for Dejante Murray instead, and like throw in like 2 first-round picks. Like if somehow the Spurs were willing to do something like that, I'd rather do that than over a Darren Fox, but I'd still be happy with Darren Fox.
No, I think that mock trade definitely is a good way to go if the Spurs would actually be open to that. But I think at this point, the kettle's too hot. They're gonna want more. They're gonna want a lot more than just that.
Yeah. It's crazy of like looking how good Julius Randle was last season. Of like Julius Randle last season, and Darren Fox was also had his best year last season. Julius Randle was the better player, in my opinion. And even just looking at the stats, it's just that right now Julius Randle is, that whole relationship is not great. Oh, there was also another quote that the guy that Julius Randle got into that argument with, the reporter Mark Berman, he had a quote of like, someone told him that Tibbs has admitted to associates that he had more troubles getting Randle to play with selfishness this season than during last season. So like you can definitely tell there's just some rifts between the two, and like they're not getting along now. And yeah, it's a mess there. What is also interesting too of like the De'Aaron Fox situation, because with De'Aaron Fox of like he hasn't played a game since January 19th. And then as well, like right now, it's kind of becoming like a Kawhi situation where De'Aaron Fox is actually not reported on the injury list because they did an MRI. He has no structural damage on his ankle. He has nothing, but it's De'Aaron Fox is the one saying like he's not feeling 100% and he doesn't want to play yet. But meanwhile, and by all signs, he should be healthy. So that's where it's like that's some interesting things to pay attention to.
Yeah. No, where I'm lost with that report that you just read is you said that they are willing or
so the quote was like Tom Thibodeau has admitted to associates he's had more trouble this season to get Randle to play selfishly or selflessness. Sorry, but selflessly. Yeah, sorry. This season than during last season. So it's just that's the trouble right now.
all right. Makes sense. Makes sense. Obviously, like we said, contract year vibes is coming along, but hopefully it's not that. But hopefully there's a solution within 5 days. We're 5 days down now.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. If not, then it's going to be a sad rest of the season for the Knicks. And do you want to move on to the weekly roundup?
Let's go.
So there's a few things here that just like rumor wise. So like the Celtics offered either Aaron Naismith or Romeo Langford, Jesus, and Josh Richardson for Malik Beasley, in the Timberwolves decline. So right now, Timberwolves have been reported to being open to trading Malik Beasley, but they didn't really want Josh Richardson and like either Aaron Naismith or Romeo Langford.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, right. It's literally just worse versions of Malik Beasley, and not really getting paid that much less. The Jazz are interested in both Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Grant. Do you think they can pull a trigger on anything there?
I think the Barnes will be a lot easier. Jeremy Grant, another one of those guys that's coveted by everyone this year. So would love to see if he stands pat or if he winds up getting moved. But it should be interesting to see where he goes. But I think Harrison Barnes obviously is the more logical, easier path of getting.
Yes. No, definitely I could see Harrison Barnes getting moved. Jeremy Grant, that's probably gonna take a lot because like he's mentioned, a lot of people are looking at him. There was I want to talk about the dunk contest. So the dunk contest was announced. We got Obi Toppin, who was robbed last year. We got Jalen Green. We got Juan Toscano Anderson. And we got Cole Anthony. Out of looking at this list right now, who do you think could be a winner?
Oh, it's easy. Jalen Green is like honestly Juan Toscano. Like I want to see. I'm intrigued now to see what he'll do.
Yeah,
but Obi could win too. But I think it's that's it. The pool's closed after that. Like everybody else, good luck. You know what I mean?
It does feel like it's between Obi Toppin and Jalen Green right now. Jalen Green has some crazy hops, so it should be fun. Dunk contest isn't the same anymore. But last main story I want to talk about. It's actually probably could have been a topic on its own. So Fred Katz of The Athletic, he actually now covers the Knicks for The Athletic, but he did cover the Wizards in the past, so I do trust his sourcing here. But he was the first one to report that Bradley Beal is open to be traded before the deadline. And that right now there's other reports that Fred Katz also reported that the Wizards are targeting Sabonis and that the 76ers are also interested in trading Ben Simmons for Bradley Beal. What are your thoughts here?
Bradley Beal just doesn't move the needle for me on any team that potentially gets him. The only way I see Bradley Beal move, and I'm like, okay, that might be a really good situation, is him going to the Lakers. That's about it. Like, there's no other situation I think he fits in, and then I'm like, oh my God, they're a title contender. Like, there's literally not one. So let's say you do move him to the Sixers, right? Yes, I think it works in the sense that you have a little bit more of a full team again too. because just as we talked about earlier, those pieces, the Seth Currys, the Matisse Thybulle, the Maxis, then paired with Bradley Beal and Embiid, makes a very full team. And I'm starting to think that, you know what, like that's the archetype of what's going to win in the league right now over a big three of some sorts, because that's what we saw with the Bucks last year. Yeah. You have the two stars. One's obviously a superior star than the other, and then you have some players that you know you could count on. And Drew Holiday was big in that sense. Can Bradley Beal be that second guy? And then who's going to be that guy you could rely on the Sixers? It becomes a question. So, but those guys might get moved. So once again, in the rubble, what lands? Like who's still around after the rubble clears? Like, you know.
That's where like my kind of thing of thinking about for the Sixers are like they're still playing really well right now. And so if they trade the farm and everybody for James Harden, it's just like it makes them top heavy, even more top heavy. And it's just like it doesn't really make too much sense for me of like I kind of like their team right now. And I think the Ben Simmons for Bradley Beal probably makes more sense for them if they could pull it off, just because like you can probably keep a lot of those other guys as well. And yeah, just it'll keep their team the same for the most part. So we'll see what actually ends up happening. The 76ers, I'm still skeptical of anything actually end up happening before the deadline, but we'll see.
Exactly. Same here.
And that is the weekly roundup. Jeff, another great episode, another great week. Do you have any closing thoughts?
We spoke about it offline a little bit. Just give it a couple seconds to talk about it here. Is really wacky way for wacky things was happening in that Hornets Cavs game. We had after the whistle 3 taken by Terry Rozier, which wind up going in, but Ed Davis on the Cavs decided to tap him on his shoulder. While a dead ball, he hits the shot and he gets teed and they count the shot. So that was a very, very strange situation. But luckily enough, it didn't affect the Cavs in the sense for them to lose the game. But it was definitely one that where you look at the refs and you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, like the dead ball to even count makes no sense at all. Like, I understand, give him the technical because the bench players shouldn't even be touching the players on the floor right now. Like, I'm fine with that. But like, we see a million times of a dead ball, the player shoots a 3, and then someone under the basket just jumps in, like knocks away the shot. And like, of course, it's a goaltend, but you're never gonna call that a goaltend and count the basket because it's a dead ball. So why is it any different when it's someone from the sideline doing just even doing any little thing to them? That was pretty absurd to even see happen.
Yeah, you know, the funniest part about it is like it's just human nature. Is that when something egregious happens, right? Like out of the ordinary, like if you respond with something more egregious and out of the ordinary, no one's going to look at how out of the ordinary the first part was. Because you should really be asking, why the hell did Ed Davis touch him? Like, what possessed him to touch him at that moment? Like, but because the ref did such a thing that made no sense, you're not even thinking about that part of it right now. It's only, why did he award him 3 shots? Why did he award him the 3 and then gave him a free throw and gave this guy a technical? You know? Yeah,
you're not wrong about that, because I even completely forgot about that. I thought you were going to say, like, the ref just had to double down because he didn't want to be wrong or anything like that. But no, you're right. Like, Ed Davis should not be touching him at all. It's so he deserves a technical, but man, that 3-ball counting, so weird. Weirdest thing. If that ended up affecting the game and changing the outcome of it, it'd be a huge story. It'd be like a complete disaster because that should never ever happen.
Momentary relapse for both of them, the ref and Ed Davis.
Yeah, exactly. Complete mess. Well, man, this was a good one. This is a good one. Next week is definitely going to be a busy episode. Or I would hope it's going to be a busy episode. We go through this every single trade deadline of like, we have, this is going to happen. These 5-10 deals are going to shake up the entire NBA. And then we see like something like with the Clippers happen. And it's like, all right, that's all that happened for the trade deadline. Good luck. Have fun. So we'll see what ends up actually happening.
All right. Well, I either am going to be A, crying, or B, cheering. So maybe a little bit of both, but
Yep. I can't wait to see and pick up this conversation next week. But that was episode 19.